Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Tara Anderson. I'm the VP of Customer Success at Newforma, and we are here with a wonderful panel of women in the design and construction industry in celebration of International Women's Day. So thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it. This session is also being sponsored by Newforma's Women's Leadership Council. So we thank you for joining us. We have a fabulous panel today. I am going to let them introduce themselves. Heather, let's start with you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Heather Galvin. I am principal and CIO at DLR Group. I sit in the Cleveland area, and I have been in the AEC industry about 15 years.
Thank you. Trish?
Yeah, I'm Trish Buzan. I'm a principal and CIO at NAC Architecture, and I am in the Pacific Northwest, Spokane, Washington, and I have been in the industry, 34 years.
Very good. Thank you. Karen?
Hi, I'm Karen Delgado. I'm the Director of Learning Knowledge and a shareholder at Colliers Engineering and Design. And I'm located in Homedale, New Jersey, and I've been in the industry for 35 years.
Thank you, Karen. And Dr. G?
Hello, so good to be back here with my Newforma family. So Dr. Giovanna Brasfield, CEO of Brasfield and Associates. I am based out here in Los Angeles, California, and I've been in the AECO industry for about 19 years now.
Excellent. Well, as you can see, we have a wide range of people from all over the United States and with many years of experience in this industry. And so in celebration of this day and really of the whole month, but today being International Women's Day, one of the questions I'd like to ask is what challenges have you experienced? You've said you have many years of experience in this industry. What challenges have you experienced, and how, as a woman, have you overcome them? So I'll start with Trish on that question.
Sure. I think sometimes men weren't sure what to do with me, how I fit into their teams. I faced bias, but I think it was more with curiosity than animosity. So I feel very lucky in that. And I had the pleasure of working with men who had strong women in their personal lives, strong, smart women. And I think that helped. I think the other challenge, and it still is today, is the pay issue. I think, in business, it was just good business to only pay people what you had to pay them. And I think that's changed a lot, but I still think we have a long way to go with that. I think people don't always recognize the value somebody brings when they are different, or they bring that value in a different way. And I think that affects pay as well.
And do you have any specific advice on how to kind of manage that in that situation?
I think keep the communication with your HR department. I think that's huge. I think they are key to making these changes in the company. They know how to navigate in the company and how to push it at top levels. And I think it's good to keep that dialogue open with your HR people within your firm.
Very good. And ladies, any of you have any ways you have navigated that challenge, as Trish said about that, not understanding people being different and how to navigate that? And not that it's a negative bias, it's more they just don't know.
I heard an interesting statistic recently about a woman will see a job posting and they will feel like they have to fulfill 100% of the requirements, whereas men will see that same job posting, and if 65% of it applies to them, then they'd be willing to go for that position. And so I think earlier in my career, always felt like, I had to prove that I could do the job, and then I would get the job. And I think that's, over the years, that's been less necessary. I think that I had more confidence, and B, I think that there were just more people coming up behind me or coming up in front of me that would allow those opportunities, and less of I'm the only person in the room, so I have to prove myself before I actually could ask for what I deserve.
Yeah. And I can speak, and I'll agree with Karen on that. I think that there's been people ahead of me, and I'm coming from a technology side. I don't have an architectural background. So speaking from technology, there is still I'm at a conference actually today, and there's about 55 people in the room, and there's only 6 women, and it's a technology and design conference. Mm-hmm. And so that being said, there's, you got to advocate for yourself. And I've learned in these years that you have to stop worrying about, you have to ask the questions, advocate for yourself, and not worry so much about proving yourself. I was in the Army previously to my technology roles, and there was always that I had to do extra things and be extra to make sure I stood out and that I could be with the men in those leadership roles, because most did not believe that women should be there. And so I found that a lot with technology in the AEC industry in my beginning of my career, but it's definitely getting better for sure.
That's great.
I just definitely have to agree with, Heather's perspective. My entry point into construction was not the non-traditional way into industry, which was more so raising my hand to volunteer and finding out kind of how do I connect and growing a pathway into inclusion. And so what I did to remove barriers is I had to align myself with the people that ran the jobs out there in the field, looking at the construction schedules, really understanding what the project executives looked at and the lens that they were looking at the RFPs or even delivery to a client of the overall project. And for me, that was when my light bulb went on and really engaged in the overall work of industry and, larger understanding the impact that I could make when it comes to inclusion.
Excellent. Heather, you said something that I find really interesting, and I'd like to just kind of expand that, and that's that concept of advocating for yourself. Mm-hmm. And so maybe you can speak a little more to that, and everyone else, please, as well. What does that mean to you, and how would you encourage women to advocate for themselves?
As far as for me in advocating for myself, it did take me a long time to be able to speak out and speak up in a large group. And I'm an extrovert, so I have no problem talking. But when you're in a group, especially of male-dominated senior level people, it's hard to feel like your opinion is validated and I just said one day, I'm just going to, if they don't like it, they don't like it. They put me here in this position and they hired me for a reason. And so time to take this and go to the next level. And talking with peers and your mentors and having a mentor, you can advocate for yourself to your mentor and they can talk with you and how to be able to create that dialogue, talking with your HR, talking with other women in the industry. And I will say, it doesn't always have to be a woman. There are men too that will help advocate with you and for you. And you just have to find that one you click with. I don't think that mentors, I know we're segueing a little bit, but I don't think mentors can be picked for you. I know a lot of companies pick those programs. I don't think they can be picked for you. I think that a mentor-mentee relationship should be a natural relationship back and forth, and you have to be able to get value out of it. I've definitely in the last couple of years, especially asking the questions. And if they sound silly, chances are someone else in that room has that same question. And I'll use today's example. It just happened today. I'm sitting there in this room of 55 people and I'm like, does my question apply? Should I ask that? Do people really care? And right as I was about to raise my hand, another person 5 chairs down asked pretty much the same question. And I'm like, should I ask it? So
I think, Heather, you raised such a timely conversation on mentorship. We think about our industry as a whole, and there's 23% licensed architects for women. There's in the industry for construction, about 10 to 14% out there in the field running the jobs. So when you think about mentorship, it's going to be alignment with our allies, our male counterparts in these positions that can really help pave the way and support our current senior leaders as women in industry overall. And it's such a need. I think I was in a panel breakout the other day, and one of the executives was talking about his call to action and how this other executive female said, am I supposed to mentor all these, hundreds of women within the organization by myself just because I'm a woman? And she actually encouraged him to answer his call to action and step up as a mentor and help support. And then others like him at the executive level of this particular organization, then they also leaned in to really join the mentor program. But you're right. It doesn't have to be a formal structured program. It can be just by asking one simple question. You never know where that question can lead and support your growth.
Absolutely. And maybe I'll ask, kind of follow up on that mentorship. Karen, have you had a mentor in your life that was, or maybe multiple in your career? And how did you pick them? How did you make that selection?
In some instances, I think they picked me. I think they saw something in me that I was enthusiastic, that I wanted to learn, or at the same time, they had a need that they needed to fill. And if they brought me along to a certain level, then I could help them. That seemed to happen more earlier in my career. Recently, I've been definitely more forward about going and selecting mine. Our company does have a formal mentor program where there's a list of qualities that the different people have. And I just spent a bunch of time looking through those, a lot of the people I do know. And I'll reach out to a person who I feel has attributes that I don't have, that I can learn from. And I've had both male and female over the years. And I am heavily involved in our mentor program. I take 2 to 3 mentors each time because in some ways I think I'm better at advocating for other people than I am myself. And being a shareholder in my firm, that allows me to elevate other women in the firm that may not have found their voice yet.
Very good. Thank you. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add on mentorship or experience, either being a mentor or a mentoree?
I think for me, it was less formal and more about curiosity and observation. I would see somebody, there's someone in particular, he would ask questions in meetings that I knew he knew the answer to. And I was like, oh, what is that about? Right. And it opens the door, that curiosity, be like, so why do you do that? Because I would see these fabulous results because he could draw people out and get them engaged in a conversation by asking that question and being open to that. So I think when you observe people and there's something about how they approach things that you just go, wow, that was good. Ask them about it. It doesn't necessarily have to be a formal thing, but when you observe those things and you're curious about them, you can learn from them. And I found people are really open to having those discussions because they're doing those things with intention and they have thought about it previously.
Very good. So in a leadership position, which you all are, how do you feel that you can encourage or others can encourage in their position, their organizations and their leadership to be more supportive of an inclusive environment and an inclusive workspace? And Dr. G, maybe we'll start with you on this.
It's just simple. I mean, this is such a great question, but it's really, really simple. It's just starting that conversation, really having open, honest, transparent dialogue, because I think that the numbers and the data shows, of course, more diverse team, more inclusive teams create better results, yield more profit. So as an industry, I think we've got to that point of knowledge and awareness, but now it's how do we move the trajectory of being more inclusive? And it's having those honest conversations about what's needed, how this level of support, the different programs, maybe the policies or trainings within the organization that can really not only create an inclusive environment, but now so we have to look at retention. Making sure that we look as an industry, AECO, at the long haul for making sure that these inclusive practices or programs and procedures or trainings are something not just a bandage to get over a certain milestone, but actually the long-term growth and expansion and improvement of an organization as a whole.
Very good. Anyone else have any thoughts they would like to add on that?
I think it's getting out in the community, wherever you can, in the high schools, in the colleges, and try to promote this industry as a career, that it is for everybody, because there's only so many that are currently there. So we need to look to our future leaders and make them see that there are people like us. If they can see themselves, then they'll be interested.
That's great advice. Any other thoughts there?
I think technology might be getting a little off track here, but I think the new technology, that opened doors in my career because I was willing to take on and learn something. Everybody else had a script that was written for them. They knew exactly, if I do this step and this step and this step, and I will be successful as an architect or an engineer. And technology just blew that up because, like Karen said, they saw something in her. She could probably take on something that they were like, whoa, that's a little out of my comfort zone, right? So I think technology offers that opportunity to take on something new within your firm that hasn't been done before. And I think that opens doors and creates paths forward within our industry. And I think there's going to be a lot of that opportunity, even more so in the future.
Excellent. And Heather, what were you going to say?
So, and just to add on to, I mean, everything that everybody's saying is amazing, and I second that. And I think some of this is, when we're talking to our young leaders, in our firm or in our communities, I think we have to make sure we are listening to understand versus just listening to listen. I think a lot of some of the things I see, and our firm is going through a lot of this right now. We are learning how to practice within the community and be differentiators. And I think it's, we can't just stop the conversation. We need to make sure we understand. I see some of where I'm going with that is, I see some of our leaders in there that they listen because they think they should versus listen to understand and actually do something with that information. We can listen all day long, but if we're not going to do anything with it, then it doesn't really help us. And I can see our firm is trying, and we are making great strides forward. So a little plug there.
No, very good. And Dr. G, I was wondering if you wanted to comment on that, because
Yes,
I have a
just one
feeling
more thing
you have
on this.
experience
Just
here.
one more thing. I was thinking about when Heather just made reference of not only listening, but actually the actions. I had a conversation recently about accessibility. We're looking at those with neurodiverse differences and really trying to figure out inclusive practices. So as we started our conversation on this question is looking at inclusion, but then listening and action. So the conversation was, how do we get our industry ready for change, for addressing the differences in learning when it comes to the job site, when it comes to the office? What does it really look like for support? If you're thinking about just the past trends, there's been like differences in ethnicity, differences in treatments for LGBTQ plus, and we had to build a pathway for more inclusive practices there. But especially when it comes to those with neurodiverse differences, is gearing up the workspace and the job sites for those differences. Maybe it's a modified work schedule if they're in the actual warehouse doing and building the equipment, or maybe looking at them as more engagement on the design side. So there's all kind of efforts, but again, it's readiness and making sure that there's a foundation for inclusion and the intent. Like we had Trish talk about the intent behind it all. So it'll be there's a major project out there that has a aspirational goal of X percent. It's huge, and it's a federal push to have this inclusion for disabled people on the project. And I'm super excited to even have that. But it's like, what does it look like for industry to be ready and have it so they stay and they feel part of a group and a team and crew out there in the field?
No, that's wonderful. And what advice would you give the industry of how to even start to be ready, how to get there?
Yeah, for that area, when it comes to those with learning differences or even disability, it's having those experts at the table to educate and train and provide awareness rather than, far too often. I remember somebody telling me this comment, far too often people in the office get together and create these amazing programs and procedures that really don't land well in the field, right? They just don't apply. They just are different because the field has its own set of operations. So the same conversation applies when it comes to those with differences in accessibility. It's making sure we have those experts at the table to help us think about a well-rounded support of what's needed at the office, what's needed in the field, how do we adjust, modify. But I understand there's no cookie cutter effort. So it's going to be all different types of ways to engage those different learning.
Very good. Well, thank you. So we had a recent Newforma Women's Leadership Council meeting, and we were talking about this panel that we were having and sponsoring, and I asked them what they would really like to know from you ladies. And one of the biggest things was a question about work-life balance and the challenges specific as women that we have with that. And they were really looking for your advice and your thoughts on how you have managed through the years to manage that work-life balance. So who would like to start on this one?
I feel like I'm very lucky in that instance. My company is highly supportive for the work-life balance. My child had some special learning needs when he was younger, and I was given the opportunity to take whatever time I needed and do my job around getting him to the services that he needed, and it made all the difference. I was a class mom because, school was a couple of miles away and nobody really cared. Just put my lunch late on my calendar. As long as I'm not booked for something, I was able to go and do that. And so I think everyone knew that I was going to be working hard, but that my family took some precedence. And as long as I got everything I needed to get done, there was not necessarily a timeline that was pushed on me. I was able to have both. And I do truly appreciate that, being in a company who appreciates that. And I see it, it's not just the women. I see the men having those same opportunities. One of the gentlemen on my staff just spent a day at his son's school in some sort of program who wasn't necessarily even with his kid. It was just talking about, what he did for his work. So I do think that is something that's known throughout the firm and has always been supported from the top down.
Karen, that's amazing. And I have to say, DLR Group is the same way. We are family first. And I'm also very thankful that I have a firm that allows me to be able to put my family first and arrange my schedule to be able to do that. And I think we also have to think about, it's not just the working mom, because you think about the working mom versus, there was always that context. That's changing. There's dads that are going into school and doing the things they need to do, paternity leave or maternity leave. But we also have to think about people too, that there's not every woman is a working mom. Not every woman is a mom. And so that's definitely, as the generations are growing, people having children a lot later or not at all. And, that is definitely a difference. And I think it comes down to culture of the firm. And Karen, like you said, you're very lucky, and myself, I'm lucky as well. And so hopefully others have that culture within their firms that they're able to do that.
Very good.
I mean, you're right. Culture has to be utmost important when it comes to work-life balance. I think there is Sheryl Sandberg that talked about work-life integration, right? Because you're always adjusting and modifying based on where you are, what you're working on. Sometimes you focus more so on family interaction. Sometimes you focus on getting that project to the finish line. So it's really, truly that integration of it all. And I mean, in my space now as a small and emerging business, I really, really have to put those boundaries up of what does it look like for this whole integration of space? Because now I kind of eat what I kill, kind of in essence, right? As a smaller firm. So I always want to say yes. I want to say no problem, I'll do it, get it done and knock it out of the park. But at the same time, I have a 13-year-old autistic son who needs services, he needs support, who needs me there, and doesn't necessarily understand that mom has to keep the lights on that you see here, keep this computer running, so all these other things that are equally as important, but doesn't take away from that mom's space. But it is, for me, an integration of balance and having support and having the transparency to say to my tribe, my parents who helped me, my brothers who helped me when it comes to making sure he's well-rounded, supported, and in school, but saying, hey, I have this coming up. I need this to work on this deliverable. I have to go on the zone or even go out of the house and maybe rent a room so I can finish and get this project to the finish line. But it is that integration that I still often struggle with. And I'm something working on constantly, but I have to write it down, look at it, and then move forward.
I hear all of you, and I see something in your experience, in my experience, in that I do work for a firm that has provided lots of flexibility over the years. I think, though, that what you're describing is that we need to not think that we have to do it all. I think we need to be selective and strategic and about where we invest our time, be it in our work or our family or other personal ambitions. And I think that can really help take some of that pressure off. if we're not putting that on us ourselves to do everything. You know, you don't have to be in every group in the company. Be in two that you can make the most difference in, or one that you can make the most difference in. And when it comes to, you know, family, my litmus was, if I'm not at this ball game for my child, are they going to remember 5 years or 10 years from now? Yeah.
Yeah.
If I'm not here this afternoon to work on this project and I work on it this evening instead, is my company going to remember that 5 years or 10 years from now? No, they're going to remember the work got done.
Yeah.
That I wasn't there that afternoon doesn't make any difference. So I think being selective and strategic about where you invest your time really helps with that balance.
That is wonderful advice, Trish. I really appreciate that. With the other side of that conversation, you know, with all of you saying that your firms are being very supportive of that, what advice would you give to young women or young people really coming into the industry that want to find a firm like that? Like, what questions do they ask? What can they do to make sure they're joining an organization that supports that kind of culture? Karen, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I feel like, you know, there are questions you can ask about the firm's values, and you can ask specific questions that will give you that answer for yourself. Like, one of my firm's core values is be safe and well. So, you know, the fact that that's part of the value kind of gives you the insight right there. I also think, you know, depending on who you get to meet at the firm, if you get to meet, you know, one of your peers, like I always like to bring a peer in for the interviews and not just be the only person doing the interviews. So that way they can get more of a feel of what it would be like for them. And so I think the interview process as a whole kind of gives you some of that information.
Very good. Any other thoughts, ladies?
No, I think, Karen, that's exactly what I do. I bring in peers so that they can see what the type of team they'd be working on, and they can ask the questions of what a typical day is like, you know, the values of the firm, what the culture is like of the firm. And they need to do their due diligence on making sure that they need to know what's important to them, and they need to ask those questions.
Very good. So during our panel at Newforma World, thank you again, you all were part of that as well. And that was such a wonderful session. Thank you. One of the gentlemen stood up and asked what I thought was a very good questions. I just wanted to revisit it here. And it was about allyship. He asked, how can I, as a man, be a good ally? What can I do? So maybe if you can just share your thoughts there on what we spoke a bit about allyship earlier, but what being an ally, what does that mean, and how can men help that and be a good ally?
What comes to mind for me is, if you see something, say something, which sounds really strange, and I don't even remember the context of that, so that might not be good. But you know, we had some policies when I first started that were like, a man and a woman can't drive to a job site together. Like, this is craziness. And one of my male colleagues said, that's nuts. I'm taking Trish to the job site. You know what I mean? And or even in meetings, if you notice something, like I've had even our CFO come up to me and go, you know, that discussion seemed like it struck you in a not good way. What was that about? And are you okay? Just, I think, observing and asking questions, and you're in a position to challenge in a way in your company sometimes, not always, but sometimes in a way that women, particularly younger women, might not be able to. So I would say observe and ask, you know.
Make sure that the events you're having are inclusive and they're not, you know, geared towards one group or another is helpful. So think through what programs that you have and how you're promoting them. Who are you inviting to meetings? Who are you bringing to clients?
Yeah.
You know, is it just the people that are like you that you're the most comfortable with? You know, you're not going to get the best results from that.
Yep.
I would say you look at the team dynamics, when you think about your managers, your entry levels that you're hiring, where you're recruiting from, is it really all inclusive when you're bringing in new talent or even promoting others to be engaged? There was this one project team that had to put together the whole team and who was going to be on what part of the overall proposal. And they submitted this beautiful, graphically designed visual for the owner. And in that, the owner's question was, where is the diversity? I'm looking at all these pictures, people that all look alike. There's not even an age difference. There's not even geographics. Everyone's from one cookie cutter almost area and then dropped into the project. And so from there, that particular firm lost the job because the group did not represent the community in which the project was actually going to be built in. The owner did not feel confident that they were all inclusive. So from there, that firm learned a valuable lesson when it comes to allyship, support, really looking at things strategically and intentionally with more inclusive practices.
Very good. So as we look forward and into the future, and as you maybe think through your past career and looking forward, what is your hope for this industry when it comes to being more inclusive of, not just women, but just diversity in general? What is your hope? How do you see it going? What do you see 10 years from now? How does this conversation differ, or does it?
Hopefully it does. Hopefully it really, really does. We've been teeter-tottering as women in industry, in construction, from 10 to 14%. For those who are licensed architects, anywhere from 20 to 23%. So hopefully these conversations, we have higher numbers when it comes to women in industry, and really thinking about how do we really attract more talent? How do we retain more talent? Workforce shortage is no surprise. We're at a critical point. We've been trending there for the last 20 years. And now large projects could be potentially impacted on delivery to the community, to the owners. And so how do we really overcome this barrier? It's by thinking about allyship. It's by thinking about inclusion. It's thinking about removing barriers for others to really have multiple entry points into industry so that they can grow, thrive, and really advance, so others see the diversity in our industry and be inclined to be a part of the journey and part of these amazing projects that are really changing the face of how we do business and our industry.
I think the STEM and STEAM programs are effective. I have a niece that just finished her master's degree in materials engineering. And I had her come to the firm and job shadow with a female structural engineer, a female mechanical engineer when she was in high school. So I do think that representation, seeing yourself, is really important. But I think those programs are going to feed more women into our industry, into the higher education in architecture and engineering and construction. I am hopeful that our firms are going to continue to improve so that once they leave school, they stay in the industry. I don't know what the statistics are now, but I know, years ago, it was huge that, like half of an architecture class would be women, but they'd get to the workforce and it would be 10% women, right? So I think those programs are really providing opportunity for young women.
I think we're not just architects or engineers. There's things like myself, technology. I never would have thought I would be in the AEC industry, and turning out of college and with an AEC firm, I've never left, and I've loved it ever since. But I mean, looking at technology, planners, interior design, there's so many other things that can, be put into this category of AECO that I think is wonderful, that can bring people in.
Thank you, Heather. Karen, any last thoughts on that?
I have hope in the fact that I think about where it was when I started in this industry 35 years ago and the change that I have seen even in the past 10 years. So I have true hope that it's even going to grow even more in the next 10. Just looking at when I walk into the cafeteria at my firm, there is a lot more diversity than there ever was, 20 something years ago when I started. So.
That's excellent. Well, that is our hope. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to all the listeners. please join us in celebrating International Women's Day. Wear the colors for today. The purple, green, and white are the colors for International Women's Day. And just be aware. I think that was a big part of it, and ask questions. And if you see something, say something. And the idea of being aware, looking out for others, looking out for those opportunities. And again, ladies, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to see and be with you all, and have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.